Hello and welcome to Uranus in Gemini. It just happened this morning, didn't it?
Yes,
Yeah.
we're in it.
We're in it. I am here with my dear friend, Ashley. I've been wanting to have Ashley on for a long time, so I'm glad we finally made this happening on this very auspicious day of Uranus in Gemini. So we decided to hop on to talk about what's happening up there in the sky and what's happening down here on planet Earth. So we'll talk about what this means for all of you. And I was really excited specifically about bringing Ashley in because every time the planets move in a major way, like when Pluto went into Aquarius, Ashley and I had a grand event at Jupiter House. And Jupiter House, by the way, is where this comes from. Ashley, do you want to tell a little bit about the story of this amazing sky map?
Yeah, this is a astrological calendar that I made for a previous space that I had in Red Hook and has traveled with me for a bit and is now in its new home at your place to help us keep track of what's going on in the sky.
Yes, it's such an honor to be the current steward of the sky map. Thank you. This is actually how I met Ashley, through Jupiter House, which is a photo shoot house she had created, which hosted this incredible design in it. So that's how we met many years ago,
Yeah.
right? And so we met through this, and here we are, the second time doing an astrology talk in front of this. Now, I was specifically excited about bringing Ashley on today because a lot of you have been asking me what the hell's going on right now with the planet and what can I do about it. Like, there's a whole lot of uncertainty. We see a lot of old systems crumbling. We're wondering how we can begin with these new emergent systems and where to begin. So we wanted to talk about that with you today, and especially in regards to Uranus moving in Gemini, what that means for us, our thoughts, our neighbors, our ideas, our businesses, everything over these next 7 years. So Ashley was early founder. She's a co-founder of an incredible app called Good Standing. She started this actually, I guess while Uranus was in Taurus, and this app is very much the theme of Uranus and Gemini. So I thought it would be great to talk about that. It hasn't launched yet, but it will be launching soon, right?
Yeah, it should be ready this month.
Okay, it's got a very Uranus and Gemini theme, and it has a lot to do. It's free; anybody can use it. It has a lot to do with things that you can do that are in alignment with Uranus and Gemini and Pluto and Aquarius in these coming times. Ashley also was one of the early employees at Consensus, which was the kind of parent of Ethereum. I don't know if that's the right way to say it, early on you had spotted so many of the challenges that crypto would go through, and a lot of those I feel like are getting solved in what you're creating right now. So do you want to just speak a little bit into that? Because I think that's so fascinating to see the arc from where you've been in the early stages of crypto to what you're creating now. It's mainly about creating new egalitarian models for us all to live in, whereas I think crypto ended up to be very kind of top heavy and only benefiting a few in the end of the day, right?
Yeah, I think like with any new technology, in the beginning, there's a lot of potential, and then when certain forces or power structures or old paradigms come in, that potential gets sort of limited or maybe kind of punted to the future. So my early career was around helping bring this technology, Ethereum, to market, but specifically what could be built using this new technology. And because that was my focus, thinking about the future, I saw the gap between what was actually being built within that technology space and what was possible. And I was much more interested in what was possible, and for me that looked like systems that helped people achieve their resource and human potential that we're currently not able to do so within the current economic paradigm. And we see this today. These things have only gotten worse since blockchain technology was first invented. If we talk about like the inequality gaps, or if we talk about the rising cost of everyday goods, if we talk about collapsing foreign currencies and things like hyperinflation, which actually are starting to maybe even bubble up, in places that we thought were more stable. So a lot of my early work was looking at these trends that were happening that have really come online much recently or become more mainstream, and then thinking about, well, what could you do with technology? What kind of systems could you build that could help solve that gap? So that's what my work is about, and Good Standing, which is this application we're launching, is specifically designed to help people out who are struggling with these challenging times from sort of an economic, but also those social and community perspective.
Yes, underscoring the word community for sure with Uranus and Gemini. It's very neighborly and focused on impact, whether you need help or you want to be giving help. So definitely excited to go into that. We'll be talking more about that, but specifically, I want to talk about Uranus and Gemini now, because this is going to be for the next 7 years of our lives. We're all in this together now, and the tone just changed from 7 years of Uranus in Taurus, which is a place it does not like to be at all. It created so much of that financial disparity, and most times Uranus is in Taurus, we've had like a depression, financial depression.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's interesting to see like your concept of like creating more egalitarian financial models came out of Uranus and Taurus when there were such terrible extremes of wealth and poverty. So we are coming into a more egalitarian landscape, I'd like to think, and it seems like that. I mean, if astrology works at all, right, which I think it does. So with Uranus moving into Gemini and Pluto going into Aquarius. So there's two channels that are changing drastically, but mainly what we're talking about today, Uranus has been moving the planet of revolution and evolution. Wherever Uranus is in, it fully revolutionizes that sign. So those of you that are Taurian, you can say goodbye to Uranus. Well, it's coming back just for a hot minute between the spring, between the fall and the spring of 2026. And then it will be in until 2033. So Uranus was in fixed Earth before, where it does not like to be. So change was not happening a lot. Like there was a lot of stuck energy. What did you think about that over the last 7 years or how did you see that, I guess, in your systems and financial models?
Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it. It felt like there was a cap on the innovation. That we also were dealing with the Earth, as you say, the reality of things, and potentially things needing to get worse before they could get better. So it did feel that the potential to move things forward was still held back by the entrenched paradigm that had to do with how we're all meeting our needs. But at the same time, I think we also saw a breaking point where we said, actually, these current systems are not allowing the majority to meet our needs, and there's probably a different way to do it. So that feels like the transition we're in right now.
I feel like this day, and there is a different way to do it. That was literally as of today. Now, breakthrough into Gemini, mutable air, and there's a new solution. Right.
Totally.
Breaking free out of that entrenchment. Did anybody else feel very stuck over the last 7 years? It was kind of like, it was hard to move. If you imagine the planet of revolution stuck under the earth, right? But also, it was just kind of feeling all the imprints on all of the suffering and everything that's wrong with the current economic system, as Taurus rules money as well. Were you going to say something before?
Well, I was going to ask if you could speak a little about, we have Uranus and Gemini, we have Pluto that went into Aquarius, but we also have Neptune that went into Aries, Saturn went into Aries, and we have all these big planetary shifts in 2025, and now we're halfway through 2025. So could you talk about sort of what you're seeing from the astrological perspective, because now we've sort of arrived. This is the last of the major shifts we were waiting for this year.
Yeah, and we've never lived in a time like this where 5 planets sequentially all change signs in 1 year. This is unheard of. I mean, we've never seen anything like this in our lifetime, and I don't know if it's happened like this in the last century. It's extremely rare, and all of the codes seem to be changing. So, what you just mentioned, Uranus is the last of all 5 to change sign. Prior to 2025, we were in a world where planets were mostly in earth signs and water signs. It can kind of set the landscape. Maybe we have to take the step back and say, like, how does astrology work? Like, the planets are basically representative of different kinds of consciousness. And they are moving through signs, and the signs are the modifiers of the expression of that consciousness, right? So, like, let's say Uranus is a planet of revolution and evolution. So when it's moving through the sign of Taurus, it is trying to transform something like money, how we use the earth, permaculture, land. And it's also having a hard time there because Earth does not move easily. We had Pluto for the last 20 years in the sign of Capricorn, and Pluto tends to magnify things so big and then break them down completely. So Pluto can create something that kind of feels like malignant growth and then an absolute destruction of what it just exaggerated. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like we saw that with Pluto and Capricorn. We saw these bloated, large corporations just get bigger and bigger and bigger over the last 20 years till we got to the end of Capricorn. And we saw the huge schism and wealth that was created by this extreme top-down model. At the beginning of Capricorn, 2008, was the financial crash, and then it began.
And just a point on that, too. So in 2008, that was also when the Bitcoin white paper was first released. And at the end of Pluto and Capricorn was when I would say the technology has reached its maturity in terms of infrastructure, not in terms of what it's done in society. So now we have a bunch of new tools, if you will, that allow us to create new economic systems, which I really think will start to happen in this Uranus and Gemini, Pluto, and Aquarius time.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So Pluto just moved into the space from Earth to air. So now Pluto's like, okay, we are done climbing the mountain of hard work and growing bigger and bigger and more bloated for these large corporations, which was ruled by Capricorn. Capricorn does rule large corporations. Aquarius rules the people. And that's why Aquarius comes after Capricorn, because there's this natural order to things. When a system gets too systematized, Capricorn, the people say, fuck you, we gotta break this down. We gotta tear down the system, break down the desk, because there's people who are not treated fairly and that we're not seeing. So Aquarian represents the people, the humanity, our society, and the revolution. Now we're seeing revolution start to sweep the globe right now already with Pluto and Aquarius. So it's just began as well. This transit has just recently started. So we have Aquarius on the stage, we have Gemini. Gemini represents Uranus and Gemini, the neural networks, and the fast-paced movement of information, quantum technologies, quantum consciousness, the mycelial network of our planet, the airwaves, which, related to things like telegraph, telephone, computer networks. We can go into so many detail, but that's probably moving more so into things like quantum computing and in the future. So we have air, where things are just going to move very fast, and Aquarius, this revolutionary time and a balancing off of the playing field, to create a more egalitarian landscape. And then we've got Saturn and Neptune in Aries, just pulling themselves up by the bootstraps, saying, all right, we got to figure this out on our own. We're not going to depend on anybody. We got to do this ourselves. So I do a ton of charts for companies. I work with CEOs quite often, and I know like tech startups, those charts often have Aquarius, Gemini, and Aries.
They're called Gemini.
Like, right, or they're called Gemini. Yeah.
They're called Mercury.
Exactly. Because Aries means fast. I'm going to do it on my own, and I'm going to do it fast. I'm going to figure it out. But I think we also have to look at the shadow of these signs too. So this shows that we are going to expand exponentially fast with technology, but we also have to be aware of the shadows of Aquarius, Gemini, and Aries as we go through this. So, shall we go a bit more into Gemini? Because that's kind of like where the Uranus is? Or
well, I wanted to respond to when you were describing the transition of Capricorn to Aquarius, and then the corporations, the power structures had gotten so large, they're so kind of earthbound and fixed in a way that is preventing change from happening. And what I also saw when you described that is when we transition to the people, what's also happening is the people are realizing that there are other ways that we could design systems outside of this centralized, hierarchical, sort of Capricorn, top-down structure. There's actually more distributed ways that we could get things done. There's more grassroots type of ways.
Let's talk about that.
So with the Uranus and Gemini coming in, this is now like the power that we have to implement those more theoretical ideas in the Aquarius world.
Yes, and Gemini representing the neighborhood, the people in your immediate network is also Gemini. The way you communicate with them, the establishment of neighbors, community, connection. I mean, this also feels very grassroots, Gemini and Aries. It's like, okay, who are the people closest to you? Who are the neighbors? How can you help them? How can you communicate? And also Aries, how can we do this ourselves?
And immediately.
We're not going to. Now. Yeah, we got to figure this out now. I mean, there is a bit of urgency, I think, with the advent of AI. Unfortunately, it is taking many jobs. Fortunately or unfortunately, whatever that is, we have to face this reality that is going to be happening. And I mean, you've always been such a futurist, and I think this Good Standing app is very much seeing what will be happening and preparing us for a future where we do have to be functioning on much more of a grassroots level. So, seeing signs of Gemini, Aries, and Aquarius, how do you see us solving some of these problems of not having basic needs met, jobs being taken by AI? Many of my clients over the last few years have been saying, every business has been going down for so many industries. Maybe the 1% is staying the 1% and growing, but so many other people have been struggling. So we definitely do need new bottom-up solutions, Aquarian solutions, Gemini, Aquarian, Aries style. And I have to say, Ashley's also like Aries, Aquarius, so who better to be talking about this? So what do you see as some ways to solve for some of these in our communities?
Sure. So first thinking about like big systemic problems and then how we actually solve those things. I think we're coming out of a paradigm where we were looking to the government, we were looking to corporations to have the solutions, have the answers. And we're now moving to a paradigm where groups of people are actually going to be coordinating together to solve those problems on both a local level, but with our technological infrastructure connecting the local to the global. And an example of this, if you look at something like how do we prepare for fires that are overtaking a lot of places around the world, right? Where we just are having a lot of issues with preparing the forest, having a lot of issues after a fire's happened. How do you do cleanup? And a lot of people are maybe like pointing fingers and saying, oh, it's this person's responsibility, it's this government agency, you know, it's this official. But the reality is, it's really up to everyone within that community to find a way to coordinate and make a plan to do that. And there's got to be better ways for us to sort of manage like our responsibility, both in terms of contributing to the underlying issues of a problem like fire. So, you know, like, how do we have some sort of volunteer labor force that maybe you have to, instead of pay your tax dollars and have another government agency take care of that, maybe you contribute some time each month to deal with the issues related to fire suppression. And so I think we're moving to a place where your kind of citizen responsibility becomes more than just what are you paying. It comes about how are you contributing. So that's kind of like a micro example of how I might think or describe what our platform helps enable in terms of like the paradigm that we're moving to.
Yeah, that certainly does feel Aquarian. How am I contributing to the society, and moving away from being siloed out and only having my needs met right now. And I think that's a lot of the issue that we've come into. We humans are, you know, the more that we advance too with our social media and everything, the more siloed people get. And this also seems like it's a direct opposition to that. It's like, no, put down the phone, get out there in your community and see how you can be of service. Because to me, this feels like our kind of salvage of our humanity. Because I always think like, well, what happens if we don't? What happens if we allow things to continue as they are? And I just want to remember like how astrology works. The planets are representative of these larger constructs of consciousness, but we, you and I, us here, we are the instruments through which the planets play their song. So in other words, we are going to actuate, we will make the action happen that is of that planetary field. So for example, Uranus and Gemini. Now, right now, if we're going to look at the shadow of Gemini, we could say divisiveness, polarity, war. And that's like, if you want to look at the last 3 wars, they happened with Uranus and Gemini. But my question is always, as an astrologer, and looking at our humanity, can we ask, does it need to translate in that way? Or what else could this mean? Can we ask that question, what else can this look like? Because we are these active neural networks and channels that are receiving Uranus and Gemini information, and it's low-hanging fruit. It's too easy. It's too much of your default network to be like, I'm voting for Trump. I don't talk to anybody who's Kamala. Or I'm voting for this. I'm for Israel. I'm for Palestine. I'm this. I'm that. I don't talk to anybody who's that. I won't look. And creating more and more divisiveness and polarity around any issue. And I can understand why the world got so divisive. But on the other hand, we have to realize that is the shadow of Gemini that we have to not fall prey to, or else we do end up in another war. And history will tell us the Revolutionary War, the Civil War, World War II, the Cold War, all happened with Uranus and Gemini because humanity fell prey to that divisiveness. So how do you think we can do that differently this time around?
Totally. I think that's the question of the age. You know, that's the question of the Uranus and Gemini transit. I think the number one thing is not giving away our power to these tech platforms that are designed to polarize us and play into that as like a identity. And then I think similarly not placing our power in someone else to solve the problem to us, which looks like, okay, is my issue that I don't have enough money this month to meet childcare needs, which actually is a huge issue for a lot of people within this country and really around the world. It's like it's a very expensive basic need. So what other types of arrangements could I set up within my community. So cooperative economic models or sort of time banking models have existed in the past and exist really still today, and with the technology that we have could be networked together and almost form like a membership of childcare cooperatives or a membership of basic needs cooperatives that I could see coming online right now. And just to talk about what that might look like, that might be, hey, my kids are part of this like childcare network, and I work 20 hours a month to help watch other people's kids, and I get sort of 20 hours back, and that translates to some sort of like reduced membership cost overall. Mm-hmm. So what we can do is say, well, what are the major problems facing us? What often is driving war is an economic concern. It's an economic reason. So if we can start to solve those problems locally, and at the same time, by doing that, not place our power on larger systems, then we start to take away the fuel that we're adding to these larger fires that are leading to more global wars.
Yes, and taking that into the future, if we create enough traction like that in our local communities, there is a point in a system, a tipping point, when government becomes privy to, wait, you're not using my systems, you're using your own. And just like how the banks decided to create their own crypto, it's kind of like that. Like they're going to eventually say, okay, well, maybe we need to create our own version of this. And then we might have a choice to still stay with our grassroots organizations. We might not want to go with their Amazon cooperatives.
Yeah, so I think you're maybe referencing like the emergence of something like UBI, which would then be, well, don't worry about your basic needs, don't worry about jobs, you'll get this stipend every month, big tech will take care of you, big government will take care of you, right? Like that's maybe sort of a paradigm that we might be headed towards. And while there can be good things that can be offered by those programs, I don't think we should like shut the door on them. I think they're not going to be effective in and of themselves. I think that we need to, as communities, say, what do we actually want to see? And why don't we go ahead and set things up, and then we can negotiate with these sort of governmental institutions, with these larger corporations, as a collective, as a community, and say, actually, we would like you to support our programs that we already have going on, rather than you set up everything for us when it's really not going to then be benefiting us as much.
Yes. And also what I'm hearing is that you're seeing all these, individual impact groups that have been previously siloed out, bringing them all together so they can all kind of work each other and help each other. So it's just like, there was like also groups like Save the Rhinos, Save the Alligators, do this and that. Well, Can they all be connected under a larger roof and become more powerful in numbers? And I think we're realizing this as a collective. We really do need to find these. I mean, it's the Gemini mycelial network that can connect us too in those ways. But you brought up UBI, and because I'm thinking, with what you're creating in this app, ways to be of service and ways to also, if you are an impact group, to have to receive rewards as well as to help others. And there's many ways to volunteer. And I know a lot of people might be thinking, when will I have time to do any of those things? But we have just come out of a 20-year story of Pluto Capricorn, where it was the exponential expansion of work and no time. And every 250 years, it's just like climb harder, work more, climb up the mountain. This whole story of work is before time or anything. And with Pluto in Aquarius and Uranus in Gemini, time actually becomes more available. And time, we're already starting to see it. There might be less money, there's more time. So what are we going to do with that time now to actually build the emergent society that we want to live in and that we want to raise our children in? I think it's the question, how are we going to use this time? And we've been so programmed to just wait, that everything's been taken care of, it's taking care of us, and slowly we're seeing the plugs are getting pulled on all of those support systems. So we have to be thinking in the future of how are we going to create our own community support right now. And I think there's many ways to do this right now, but it's a reality that is we all have to be kind of grappling with on some level, I think.
Yeah, and I think I love how you phrased it, like we might be heading to a time where we don't have as much money, but we have an abundance of time. And what I would also say is within that, we're then allowing for the emergence of other types of value that look different than sort of our old money systems, and have more to do with what we value now as humanity. You know, do we value influencer culture and how many followers or how many likes you have, or do we actually value different things that we'd like to see more of and promote more of? So that's a lot of what we're enabling on our platform, ways that people can contribute to things that actually don't have a huge value in our current economic system, but that we actually all know we value on a deeper level. And therefore, if we now have these constructs to create new economic systems, can we pair them to incentivize and reward the things that actually provide a deeper level of fulfillment and purpose for folks?
Absolutely. Yes, we can. So, something of the Aries nature comes up here is like the need for personal agency too. And I feel like that's been very programmed out of us over these last 20 years. And to be discerning, we're having to be more discerning than ever with so many loud options. And the loud ones are usually not the best, right? Like you Google anything, and it's like all the sponsored things at the top are usually the ones you don't want.
Yeah.
So it's like taking the time to kind of filter through all of this to find out, okay, how do you want to spend your time? Where is the real need? And again, the Gemini mycelial metaphor applies, because it's sort of, you know, in the wood wide web, it goes to what tree needs help. It'll send the message to where the real help is needed. And there's just an innate intelligence to these neural networks and these systems.
Totally.
What's happening with Uranus and Gemini is also that Uranus represents the higher mind and higher consciousness, and Gemini is the neural networks that course through humanity. So we are open right now and very open to new messaging of higher consciousness and brand new flashes of insight, new ideas that fully break down old paradigms to move through our system. And I would just say, if they're coming through you right now, and if you're getting these new ideas, don't be afraid of them. Try them out. Like what Ashley's created is a full-on Uranus and Gemini, Pluto and Aquarius system that, you know, at first you might be saying, well, how is that going to work? Well, it is a system of the future, and I think that we are entering a completely new terrain. As we just mentioned, 5 planets are changing sign, something we've never experienced in our lifetime, and all going into air. So I think we also have to ask first, Uranus represents a revolution and a breakdown in Gemini, in the sign of communication and community, the old way of doing things, and maybe the old way of not doing things. The old way we used to not connect to our neighbors and what was going on outside of our homes. And I think that was happening for so long, as we were conditioned to just be in your little safe house, in your cell, and just make sure you got yours, you know. And it was that save the money for the retirement, that whole story. All the planets reached the end of the sign just now. They came crashing in, and it's like we saw those systems all break down one after another.
Yeah, and you mentioned when we were talking a little earlier about the U.S. chart.
Oh, yeah.
And how there's potentially something about the U.S. having a Gemini rising. Yeah, could you speak a little about that?
So our country, the United States, is a Cancer sun sign, born on the 4th of July. We just had a birthday for the U.S. with all the fireworks and everything. So, but also, the United States has Uranus in Gemini. So it's born with Uranus in Gemini. Many of the tenets of this country are very Uranus and Gemini. Uranus represents freedom, liberation of Gemini speech. You know, very much in our Bill of Rights, our Constitution, this is a big tenet. And freedom of religious expression. I don't know how well we've done with all of those things, but we're definitely coming back around to them, and we're being asked that. So the U.S. is a Uranus in Gemini. My mentor, one of my mentors, Susan Miller, actually always said that the United States chart has a Gemini rising, not Sagittarius rising, which is what a lot of people say. And it would track, because the U.S. has always gone to war with Uranus and Gemini. Mm-hmm. And, so apparently this country gets very triggered when Uranus goes into Gemini, and it becomes quite divisive. So as we are all kind of these conduits of the planetary energy, we have to be so mindful not to sway in that way, because we could certainly see history repeating itself. And I mean, look at it this way, with we created the World Wide Web when Pluto was in Scorpio, in the 80s, right? And it was starting to build as this underground web, and then the dark web and all of that. And now, and you would have to go on the web and surf the web. But now with Uranus and Gemini, we are the nodes in the web. With AI, it's I am a node, you're a node, we don't need to surf the web, because we are the web. Our words, our thoughts, our emanation is part of this mass worldwide web right now. So I would just add that it's so much about refining your nervous system and focusing on your health, because what's going on with Gemini rules the nervous system. And so we need to be clear conduits so we don't start kind of polarizing, which has happened prior to every other war with Uranus and Gemini. Mm-hmm. And yeah, I'm glad you brought that up about the US. And I guess the question is, what is another way? And we should start thinking about that and envisioning it. Ashley, what do you think another way, what else could this look like if Uranus enters Gemini, to hold these paradoxes within us and re-envision a third door? What could that be?
Yeah, I think on a more spiritual or metaphysical level, there's a lot of teachings about duality and light and dark, and the necessity of the opposite to exist, of the light, for the light to exist. And so I think the sort of higher order of things is about embracing the darkness and seeing that as a lesson that's bringing something else into being. And that's not a way of saying that is excusing bad behavior, but it's a way of framing things right now so that we first understand, if there is darkness, of which there's a lot, where is it actually coming from? And I think what our generation is seeing is that a lot of darkness has to do with unprocessed or unhealed trauma, negative cycles that have existed from these wars compounding over generations. So our generation has an opportunity to say, we understand that there's been hurt, that there's been suffering, but we're not going to participate in the continuation of that cycle. And so that looks like being able to arrive in a place where we're arriving at a solution, which is what would actually sort of address where this person's coming from, or that person's coming from, this nation's coming from, or that nation is coming from. And what I think is important to remember is usually world leaders, usually people in power, do not actually represent the desires of the people, especially now after this sort of Pluto and Capricorn transit. So I think what we can actually really practically do is unite on platforms outside of political parties that we know are not actually acting within the interest of those people, which I believe are actually both parties in America right now are not actually acting in the interests of the underlying people. We have to find a different way to relate. Similarly with corporations, they're not actually acting in alignment with the interests of the people. However, they are composed of shareholders which represent the people. So using different platforms, using Uranus and Gemini transits of these sort of new technologies, there's going to be ways where we can come together and actually represent our interest and advocate for the changes that we would like to see, advocate for the solutions that are possible that our current power paradigms are not allowing to usher in. And so I think this is why we're seeing this word revolution tossed around right now. If Uranus and Gemini is strong in the US chart, Pluto and Aquarius being there with sort of the American Revolution, the French Revolution, then I do think this is a time where the people actually say, we understand that we have these constitutional frameworks and we actually don't think they're being upheld by the current power paradigm, and we're going to step forward and uphold them with some new system. And that's what I think we're going to see over these next, really 20 years of a Pluto and Aquarius, but Uranus and Gemini giving us the tools we need to make that happen.
I love that. I mean, and it's so important to have a vision right now like that. I think that, if everybody here is just talking about collapse, well, that's what you get. So it's really important to be visionary because everything has been created from somebody who had a vision, everything we have. And what you speak about, what you fill your mind with, that is a beautiful vision for humanity with acknowledgement of the darkness. But can we see a third way? Can we see a way that this can work out? That's not just everything's destroyed in a collapse and all the systems plugs are pulled and that's it. Because it's up to us. I mean, we are going to be the ones living in this new emergent world. So it is time to start preparing for that. And also just the power of collective vision, I want to underscore with everything going into air right now. The resonance of your thoughts is compounded tenfold. When Pluto was in Capricorn and Uranus was in Taurus, there was a density in the field. Everything was in Earth. So the outer evolutionary planets, ideas, concepts, anything had to push through dense rock and dense Earth. Mm-hmm. And now the whole morphic field is opened up where ideas, we're seeing the telepathy tapes as very popular right now. We're seeing more and more experiments being done. I mean, Neuralink, which is trying to mimic telepathy, but we're seeing all of this thinning out so much. So I would just underscore the importance of your own quality of mind and the refinement of that, and the importance of actually having a vision that is good, a vision that is good for humanity. And thinking about that often, because, I hear a lot of talk of collapse, and we need to also hold a counterbalance to that and be in a space of an emergent new system that feels exciting. It's something you want to be a part of. And that's why I was so thrilled about having my Aries Aquarius friend here who's actually building these systems, and there's maybe some of you are too. I'd love to meet you and understand what you're doing and become a part of it. But I really think it's important now that we learn about the new systems being built, the people building them, and how we can contribute, because this is our future. And I would also just want to ask too, what you see. I'm just curious, what you might see about what could the world look like, let's say, if we can go in the future, after these systems have been adopted on some level, what would be the role of government in that world?
Well, I think that what we're really doing is making government something that is more participatory by everyone. So I think that you're just more involved as an everyday person. So rather than like, oh, I voted, or oh, I posted on social media what party I support, you're more like, hey, this week I participated in a food bank shift within my network and helped out. I also have this like childcare cooperative membership thing, which I know that if I'm doing this many like contributions per month, I'm getting kind of like this discounted tax credit system that's enabling me to meet my needs better. And that's something that isn't organized at this like huge national or even state level. It's probably a little more on like a local, regional level. So I think we're going to see government become something that feels a little more like old school kind of like community neighborhood associations, maybe even like the role of sort of the church or religious institutions used to play that has kind of gone away, but now we could see emerge in like third spaces or community spaces. So I think it's gonna be, I hope it's gonna be more fun, more participatory, more engaging. I think that's sort of like the American way is we'd like to find ways to do things entrepreneurially. We'd like to find ways to do things that are more innovative than maybe the more like socialist trend, which has been, well, I just want to like pay a huge chunk of my taxes and have like some third party figure that out for me, and then I really don't want to have any like autonomy or agency or say in that. I don't really think that's the American way. However, we do need some of that thinking in terms of social responsibility, because we can't allow this current paradigm of some certain people being excluded from being able to participate in the benefits of the economic system. That doesn't create a society that actually makes us feel good, that makes us feel, what we want to contribute to. So I think there are ways that government just becomes more part of like our DNA, our sort of civic society on a everyday kind of grassroots level.
Agreed. I love that. Also, it's even questioning of the figureheads. Like, this almost feels like residual from the monarchy. The fact that we need to have like the president and all of these figures to play the roles. Like, that's not very Aquarian. Like, I wonder if these are going to be like us all voting on different policies, and maybe there'll be representatives for the communities, but it feels very Leo, like monarchy style, where there's this man at the top. It's wild still that we've never had a woman president in this country, but for our country it's always been one man at the top. And I think with AI and everything, we might be even moving into just like what are the best policies for our communities, and AI might be able to figure that out too, which would be like a very Aquarian thing, that we're all collaborating more and more involved as well with that system.
Yeah, I think to that point, the real leaders of our time are going to be about helping to transition power from that current structure to a new, more distributed structure. And we're sort of in that interim role. Yep. So the types of leaders that I think we will see are those who don't step forward in the same way that we've seen in the past. They're not saying, hey, I'm trying to be the leader of everything. They're trying to say, hey, I'm trying to help distribute more power to the people.
Absolutely.
And I think that's a good sign.
Yeah, they are here for service. Agreed, completely. I mean, that's really what a leader is supposed to be in the first place. They have to serve the community. Somehow that got lost here along the way. But I envision that too, that our next leader will be a true visionary and completely different, whether it's community-based or larger level. Let's see what time it is. Any other things we want to check on with Uranus in Gemini and all of this tuning that we're doing? One more thing I can mention before we close up is that, looking at the history of Uranus in Gemini, seeing all of the advents in communication, it's pretty astounding and how fast things travel. Like the creation of Morse code, the telegraph, which was the first way to transmit information far and wide. The Pony Express, which was, we used to have ponies that would deliver messages from state to state. There's so many.
That was fast at one point.
Yeah, that was the fastest way to transfer a message was through a pony. I think it would just take 10 days to get something halfway across the U.S. That's not bad. So, I mean, it's amazing to look at that now and consider also what is now. I mean, we can see, obviously, AI seems to be becoming a bigger part of our lives, but in the same token, it's also the discernment with AI, how we use it, what we give to it, what we ask it, and knowing that you're going to receive that like tenfold in return in this time of air. So do you want to add anything to your thoughts on our use of AI that's going to be expanding so exponentially with Uranus and Gemini? Also, we should just mention that Gemini just launched this new thing called GEMS, which is your personal assistant, over the last couple of weeks. The launch just went live. So it's called Gemini GEMS, this AI that kind of does a lot of your admin work for you. Here we go.
Yeah, I think that AI is a reflection and it's a mirror of our current consciousness, our current power structures, our current paradigms, and that isn't it's a way of saying that it's up to us how we further engage and develop and use that tool, because it is emerging so rapidly. At the same time, the barrier to entry or the ability to use it for good has never been lower in the history of humanity. Like, we've never had such a powerful tool that is in the hands of those who want to enable more destruction, but at the same time we've never had such a powerful tool in the hands of people who want to amplify the good that we can do and see within the world. And so I think the only thing we can do is remain rooted in that truth, learn about that, and work with that every day. And I think that humanity will choose that course at the end of the day. We just haven't quite organized ourselves to be aware of it and be united on sort of that front. Mm-hmm. But I think that the course of history will show that that is what we end up doing. And so I don't think that means that we can't just expect it to happen, though. Mm-hmm. It only happens because we educate ourselves and make specific moves to go within that direction, and that's sort of the essence of what I think this Uranus and Gemini transit is about. Mm-hmm. Are you going to choose to step more into the light, or are you going to choose to stay within this sort of dark paradigm that's trying to keep you from doing that? And that's sort of the personal choice we all have to make right now.
Yeah. I'm hearing a bit of Aries in what you're saying too, for sure. But also with Gemini, there's such wisdom in being able to like hold that paradox of there's light and dark, the acknowledgement of both, and be able to discern and to be that clear channel of discernment. We really have to turn the volume up on that with the amount and the sheer volume of information being thrown at us and the disinformation, everything like that. But yeah, there is such wisdom in the shadow and the light and of Gemini too, that I think we're all going to be waking up to. So if you are a Gemini or whatever your sign is, there'll be a separate live where we go through all the signs. But Ashley, I want to thank you so much for coming over here.
You. We finally made it happen.
Yes.
We've been talking about doing this for a while, so
we have.
What a special day.
And welcome to Gemini, Uranus. If you want to check out more of Ashley's work, you can go to goodstanding.app. We're going to link it in the notes below. Would you like to say anything else to an invitation?
The invitation there is, if you're feeling after this like, oh, I like what they're saying, but I'm not quite sure what that means for me specifically, I think that's where on goodstanding.app you can fill out our form, and there can be some specific advice that I could help out with, or people on my team And I think similarly, Rebecca, in terms of if people are like, what's in my chart that might help me prepare and adapt to this transit in terms of a changing economy, a changing culture, a changing society.
Yeah.
You know, I think that's something where astrology, I know it's been hugely impactful for me in this way on a personal entrepreneurial level. I know I haven't talked about that much, but astrology has been a major tool for me among my other tools in terms of arriving at how do we, you know, collectively navigate this, and I know that it could be a tool for others.
Absolutely. It's certainly been a tool for me my whole life as well, for sure. So definitely check out Ashley's work on goodstanding.app. And also, you know, if you want to volunteer, there's so many great opportunities there too as well. I will say how this is affecting each of you individually, looking at your astrology, this Uranus and Gemini ingress means something different for all of you based on your charts. And it will be very interesting to see how this is activating. I know you're here now launching this new company with Uranus at the very base of your chart today as we speak. It's on her IC. So I think it's very much firing up this innovative creation that you've just birthed. You know, and that's the power of Uranus. Like I have another friend who maybe I'll have on here in the next month sometime, who has Uranus on her MC, the top of her chart, and she's also birthing a new system. So Uranus in Gemini is this extreme creator of new systems of communications, and I would just say also to like take some risks, just explore things with this. Like there's no Gemini is very curious and exploratory too, right?
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah. Well, thank you for joining us. It's been so much fun. It's been so much fun to have you here, Ashley.
You too, Rebecca.
Thank you.
We'll do it again soon.
Yes.
All right.
Bye.